As we approach the end of summer, you're likely wondering, what do you do with your garden? Especially the plants that are still producing and giving you fresh harvests. It can be really hard to rip out plants that are still giving you fresh produce, but if you're wanting to plant a fall garden, you might need that space for something new. And a lot of times people wonder, do you just wait until these plants are done producing and then plant your fall garden? Or do you rip things out now and plant your fall garden now? So throughout this video, I'm going to be sharing some tips for this transition phase from summer garden to fall garden. And I'm going to show you all of my plants and the plans that I have for my garden so that you can implement the tips that work for you and maybe do the same thing that I'm going to be doing here in my garden as well. So follow me along, and I'm going to show you everything that we're working on right now and some tips for you too. So right here, we're looking at my cucumber plants, and this is a great example of something that's going to get ripped out. They have pretty much just been demolished by aphids. It's a little bit my fault. I kind of just let these plants go the last few weeks because we had a lot of other things going on. So they're pretty much done. They're not going to recover from this, and it's pretty much the end of the season for these plants. They were not producing quite as well anymore anyways, and so this is an example of some plants that I'm going to rip out. Over here, if you look at this bed, I have some acorn squash and some melons, and my cantaloupe melons never actually did really well. They struggled in the heat and they pretty much just rotted on the plant before they ever even really got ripe. I have a few acorn squash though that are still doing well, so I'm going to possibly keep a few of the acorn squash plants, but all of these plants that look really dead and pretty ugly, they're going to get ripped out. But now, let's take a peek at my favorite part of the garden right now. I still have some beautiful pepper plants that are producing really well still. So I'm going to leave this whole garden bed in the ground and let it keep producing all the way up until the first frost, when the pepper plants just aren't really producing well anymore. I have plenty of space. If you didn't have enough space, then you may need to decide whether you want to keep the peppers or rip them out. But being that I have enough space, they're going to stay in the ground until they don't produce anymore this season. I also have a really beautiful basil plant right here, and it's going strong. So I'm going to keep this plant in the ground as well. Over here we have a bed that's bare, and it's going to be ready for fall planting right now. And if we look right up here, I have some pepper plants that are also still doing well. Now let's take a peek at the zucchini. The zucchini is doing okay. I'm still getting a few zucchinis, but you know what? I have a lot of pest problems right now on these zucchini plants, so I may end up just ripping them out. I'm a little bit tired of zucchini anyways by this time of the year. I just wanted to show you the example of how the plants look. They're doing okay. They are having a bit of a issue with some pests, but they're doing all right. So I may keep one of the plants and rip out the other few, but that's what the zucchini's looking like. Now as we make our way out to the tomatoes, I have some tomato plants like this cherry tomato plant here, this tomato plant here, that are doing really well. But for the rest of my tomato plants, they really never grew that well this year. I definitely need to amend my soil out here. So that's going to be in some future videos. I'm going to be doing a soil test out here and showing you guys how to read the soil test. And then I'm going to be doing a lot of amending so that I can get the soil ready for next spring. So stay tuned for that series of videos. The last few plants that I'm going to keep is my okra. They really just started producing within the last few weeks. They were really slow to start off the season, but now they're doing well, so I'm going to keep them in the ground. They are healthy, they don't have any pest issues yet, and since we're just barely starting to get our okra, I'm going to keep these in the ground. So that was a quick tour of what my garden looks like right now. I have cucumbers that look horrible. I have some cantaloupe melons that do not look well. Those are definitely coming out, but I have things that are also doing really well still, like my okra, a couple tomato plants, my basil, and the peppers. So everything that's healthy and producing, I'm going to keep in the ground. Things that don't look good anymore and that are not producing are getting ripped out. And I'm very fortunate that I have enough room to still keep some plants in the ground and still plant my fall garden. If you don't have enough room, you're going to have to make a choice of what you want to keep, so then you have room to plant your fall garden. Or you might decide that it's more important to keep those tomato plants to get a few more tomatoes before planting your fall garden. But also keep in mind that there's things you could plant next to your existing summer crops. For example, you could plant a row of carrots next to your tomatoes that are still producing, or you could plant a row of radishes next to your okra plant that is still producing. Remember that you can still implement some companion planting strategies. The other thing is that if you are going to plant a fall garden, you still have to plant things on time to be able to get a harvest before that first frost. Even though you might still be getting harvest from your summer crops, you still have to take into account the amount of time needed for the fall crops to mature. And I have a free planting schedule that you can download below, and that's going to give you an outline of all your planting dates that you can fill in based on your first and last frost dates. So definitely grab that below. It'll link in the description, because for example, if something needs 80 days to mature, you need to count backwards from your first fall frost, and it needs to definitely be in the ground by that date, or you're not going to have a harvest that gets mature before the weather gets too cold. There are certain crops that can handle a light frost and even that are pretty hardy to the frost. But other crops are a little more sensitive, so you just need to make sure you're getting your stuff in the ground sooner than later. And the other thing is, if you miss your first planting dates, there's a lot of fall crops that mature quickly, like radishes, baby mixed lettuce, arugula, spinach. And so all of those things, you still have plenty of time to get a harvest from, so don't get too stressed out about ripping everything out and planting your fall garden, but it is definitely time to get a lot of things in the ground. And one of my favorite fall vegetables to grow is lettuce. It's so easy. It's very easy to just directly sow by seed out into the garden, and you can plant it multiple times throughout the fall and get staggered harvests so that you have younger plants and older plants, so you can just continue getting a harvest all season long. And it's actually pretty hardy to the frost even. You could have a light frost and it's still going to survive. So if you head to this video right here, I talk exactly how to plant your lettuce by seed. Super simple. So head to that video next and I'll see you there.